Hello and welcome to another episode of Fast Forward, a podcast from QSR Magazine where we talk to the founders, innovators, and entrepreneurs behind some of the world's most exciting fast casual restaurant concepts. My name is Sam Oches. I am the editor of QSR and the editorial director of Food News Media. Today, I am sharing a conversation with Paul Damico. He is the CEO of Naf Naf Grill, a Middle Eastern fast casual based in Chicago that now has about 40 locations and is growing through franchising. Before I jump into today's conversation, I do first want to tell you about another restaurant podcast that I think you're really going to like. Restaurant Unstoppable is one of the industry's longest-running podcasts with an incredibly deep archive of interviews featuring everyone from restaurant executives to chefs to authors and industry consultants. Host Eric Cacciatore believes that behind every great restaurant is a great person. Tune in to Restaurant Unstoppable wherever you listen to podcasts, see what greatness looks like, and start aiming for greatness in your own life. Now, back to our program. A lot of you probably heard about Paul Damico first when he was the president of Moe's Southwest Grill. He was president there for about 6 years. Prior to that, he'd worked largely in his career in the concessions and airport business, specifically with HMS Host for several years. But he was with Moe's for 6 years, and he helped to grow that brand from 200 locations to about 700 when he left. So he really helped Moe's to become a major player in Mexican fast casual. After Moe's, he also was the president of North America for all of Focus Brands, which of course Moe's was within. But in 2017, Paul got this opportunity to move to Chicago and become the CEO of Naf Naf. Naf Naf was obviously a much smaller brand compared with the concepts within the Focus portfolio, but it had received a sizable investment from Roark Capital Group, which also invests in Focus Brands. And Roark came to Paul and invited him to take a look at Naf Naf and see if he might be interested in taking on the startup business and seeing if he can apply some of that same magic to it that he did for Moe's and turn it into something scalable and something special. And so that's what he did. In 2017, he went to Naf Naf. He launched the franchise program there. The brand had about 20 locations when he joined, and now he's grown it to about 40. But there's plans for much more growth, particularly through franchising. Right now, it's mostly across the Midwest, but they are looking at growth across the U.S. And what Naf Naf really has going for it, beyond now having a very skilled CEO at the helm, is it is a very unique menu. This is really one of the first Middle Eastern fast casuals to spring up as a multi-unit concept prepared for scalable growth. And that's really exciting, particularly as you take a look at the trends going on in Mediterranean fast casual. So when you see brands like Cava taking off, it's not so much of a stretch to see Middle Eastern brands do the same. Naf Naf really draws its inspiration from Israeli food, and Israeli food has a lot in common, obviously, with Mediterranean food. And so with Mediterranean really taking off across the country, it's not so much of a jump to think that Naf Naf could make this happen with Middle Eastern fast casual as well. And Paul really seems like the perfect person to get it to that point where it becomes a thriving fast casual chain across the country. I had a really great conversation with Paul in his Chicago office about Naf Naf, the opportunity he saw there and where he sees it going in the future. I really enjoyed especially the talk we had about off-premises growth. He has a lot of really interesting practical thoughts about that, so please make sure you stick around until the second half of our conversation when we dig into that. Paul started by talking more about his career and walking through all of the steps that led him up to becoming the CEO of Naf Naf Grill.
I have been in the industry for 35 years. Went to school at Johnson & Wales, got my culinary degree there, got my business degree there, my hospitality degree, and then joined Marriott Corporation because that's what everybody did back in the early 80s. Yeah. I spent 15 years with Marriott and Host Marriott and Host International, running airport concessions. From there, the entrepreneurial bug bit me, and I decided at that time with a wife and 3 young kids to pack up and move to Southern California and start a restaurant company with a couple of colleagues from Marriott. And we did that, and we built over 100 restaurants in a 5-year period. We eventually sold that back to HMS Host. And then I became the chief operating officer for SSP, concessions company based out of London. Mm-hmm. We started the U.S. division of SSP America. and ran 35 airport concessions for them, relocated back to the East Coast. Did that for a few years, and then I got a call from Steve Romanello, the founder, or one of the founders of Focus Brands.
Sure.
And at that time, Focus Brands was made up of Carvel Ice Cream, Cinnabon, Schlotzsky's, and they were about to acquire, at that time, Moe's Southwest Grill. And I was afforded the opportunity to go down and lead that brand, which was exciting for me.
Yeah.
It was a chance for me to leave the non-traditional concessions business and really start to become heavily involved in traditional brick-and-mortar street side restaurants. And I ran Moe's for 8 years. Took it from 200 units to 700 units. At that time, we were going to go through some reorganization at Focus Brands, and I became the president of that division of Roark. Did that for a few years, and then Roark had asked me to consider looking at Naf Naf Middle Eastern Grill. It was a startup based in Chicago. It had a handful of units. It seemed to be ahead of its time on trend. There weren't really any Middle Eastern restaurant chains out there.
Yeah.
So it intrigued me, and it took me a few months to make that decision. But then moved to Chicago, and I've been here just about 3 years now, running this brand.
Yeah. So what appealed to you, especially going from a restaurant company that had 700 locations in Moe's to this startup brand? What was the appeal for you that made you take that step?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the business, like 35 years, and I've had the opportunity to work for giant companies like Marriott, great companies that were not startups but had hundreds of units, and then obviously running Focus Brands. At that time we had 5,000 domestic units under 6 brands, and so I've never really had the opportunity in my career to take something from an incubated state and prepare it for what I hope is going to be explosive growth in the franchising model.
Sure. Was there some opportunity for creativity maybe too? I mean, I imagine once you get a brand to a Moe's size, you're limited in what you can do, right?
You are, because the brand is now growing at 100 stores a year. I have stayed... I'm pretty proud that I've stayed pretty close to my culinary roots, and so when you talk about creativity, I think about innovation and how restaurant companies either do or don't stay relevant through their culinary innovation, and I've done that in almost every job that I've had because I'm a culinarian at heart, and I get to do that here at Naf Naf too. We've got a great executive chef, Pat Peterson. And he and I work very close together. But I stay close to the culinary, and I think that's critical in a restaurant company for the leader to stay so grounded and so granular in the culinary piece of the business.
I mean, that's the very essence of the brand, right? That's the customer piece of it. You would hope, right? It should be, at least. So tell me about Naf Naf's origin. So before you got here, it had grown to about 30 locations before you joined, is that right?
No, it was about 20 locations.
Okay, so walk me through the origin story and how it got to the 20 before you got here.
So Sahar Sander, our late founder, came to the U.S. from Israel in the 90s. And he brought with him the recipes of his grandmother for falafel, chicken shawarma, and pita. He spent a couple of years here figuring out what it meant to immigrate to the U.S. as a young man, and found a closed-up Taco Bell in Naperville, Illinois. Was able to secure that lease and started selling those 3 core products that we sell today: chicken shawarma, falafel, and pita. And he made a name for himself very quickly in this defunct Taco Bell piece of real estate. And he caught the eye of an Israeli fertility surgeon here in Chicago, which created for him the first piece of seed money to take the brand to a new level, and grew the brand to, I think, 15 units at that time. And then in 2015, Roark came in with an investment. They saw the brand as on trend, something that they hadn't seen in all of their investigating of acquisitions. Nobody was doing it, and nobody had that level of quality of food. So it intrigued them. And Roark had never done a startup, invested in a startup. And so that intrigued them, and so they came in and made that investment, and the brand really started to grow. It grew outside of Illinois. It grew into Minneapolis. It grew into Ohio. It grew into Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And then towards the end of 2017, they were ready to make another level of investment, but they wanted a different team to do that. Mm-hmm. And so that's when they tapped me to come to Chicago and take the brand, stabilize the operations, and really prepare it for franchising growth, which for me had been my last 15 years of experience.
Sure. So thinking about 2015 and talking about Roark, having interest in this on-trend brand. When an entity like Roark invests in you, that really does say something. It's Roark, right? So clearly they saw something special in Naf Naf. And at that time in 2015, I think we had kind of hit this point where Mediterranean fast casual was catching on. So was this really a matter of looking for that next thing, that next fast casual category that they saw that scale potential?
I think so. And I think that Naf differentiated itself from that Mediterranean set. So Zoe's was in the house, Cava and Verts, Roti. They were all dabbling. They all had 20 to 30 stores. And so Naf set itself apart with its food. And so that's what caught their eye. And so we embarked on this new venture to say, how can we take this from at the time 20 or 25 locations, and how can we really scale it? Mm-hmm. And how fast can we scale it? And is this brand franchisable? Because really, when you think about the brand, it is an unknown cuisine with an unknown name, mm-hmm. right? And so if you lined up the average 10 Americans, and you said, when's the last time you had chicken shawarma? You might get one that says they've had it. Now, Costco has done a great job of introducing things like pita and hummus to the U.S. palate. Mm-hmm. And so that is something that the brand is firmly grounded in. But when you talk about falafel, it's an emerging culinary delight for lots of vegetarians and non-vegetarians. But chicken shawarma and falafel are something that has to be introduced to the consumer as we open restaurants across this country. We feel very confident that when we get them to try it, they will become fans because the food is truly amazing.
So there's a familiar touch point with the Mediterranean overlap with something like pita or falafel, but bringing a new filter to it through the Middle Eastern fast casual category. Does that make your job a little easier, at least?
I think it's the spices really that separate us from the other people that play and the other concepts that play in the Mediterranean space. When I think of Mediterranean, I think of more lettuce-based, salad-oriented concepts that have a protein. Salads are clearly, we have one salad, we have a romaine product in our offering, but we are not about salads. Mm-hmm. We are 85% of our mix comes from a chicken shawarma hummus bowl. Our hummus, I think, is one of the best in the industry. Nobody's competing in the chicken shawarma built from scratch every day in every restaurant category. And so when you can separate yourself from the pack, and that's the work that I embarked on as soon as I came here. The brand at that time was called Naf Naf Grill, shawarma, fries, and falafel. Mm-hmm. And that's confusing to some people because not many people understood what that really meant. Certainly not the name. Yeah. And so we went through a brand evolution very, very quickly after I started in early 2018. And it's something that we had to step back and say, what do we want this brand to be? And that's when we came up with Naf Naf Middle Eastern Grill, and dropped the tagline. So it's clear we want to own the space. It's clear that our culinary is something we lead with, and it's a fun and exciting brand.
Sure. Naf Naf, where's that name come from?
That's a name. There's a meaning behind that name. Loosely translated would be, hey, let's go Naf. Let's take the family. Let's bring them into the backyard. Let's grill some meats and let's get together.
Interesting.
In America, you might say, let's go have a barbecue.
Yeah,
right.
Sure,
but
sure.
it's a very sentimental way of an Israeli family saying, let's go hang out together and let's barbecue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the founder is Israeli.
Yep.
But Obviously, Middle Eastern food is so diverse and so many different things that kind of play into it. Do you guys try to hit all of the touchstones of Middle Eastern cuisine, or what is the cuisine?
We are trying to stay true to the founders' roots of Israel. Our spices are imported from Israel. Our eggplant is imported from Israel. Our pickles are imported from Israel. Our chickpeas come from Israel. So we are trying to stay true to the roots, because you're right. When you say Middle Eastern or Mediterranean, it stretches across a region that is massive,
right,
and has many different types of cuisine, and we want to stay focused. We don't want to expand the menu to the point where it becomes confusing on really what we are.
Mm-hmm. It's the spices, that part of it. It seems like that's like maybe a key point to this.
It
spices,
is.
Sauces.
It is, because our food is so flavorful, and can be made very spicy if you like that, if you desire that. But when you think about shawarma seasoning, which is truly something that is found in Israel, Jerusalem seasoning, which is the seasoning we put on our chicken kebabs, those are the spice pack that we use for our lentil soup. Those are all Israeli-based spices.
Mm-hmm. You came in here a few years ago. You said that your intention was to really scale this concept, franchise it, and see it through to its full potential. What was the first thing you needed to do? I mean, when you came here, what was the state of the business, and what was sort of the first thing that you wanted to put your fingerprints on?
There were lots,
Okay.
but first, I mean, it's so similar to the day that I stepped into Mo Southwest Grill, right? The brand, we had to work on the culinary. We had to standardize the culinary. We had to get recipes drawn up. We had to get clean labels on our spices. All of the food was fantastic, but we needed to standardize it in preparation for franchising. Mm-hmm. We had to build a team. We had to bring in some new talent in the design and construction, in the marketing, in the culinary. We had to bring in new talent because franchisees today demand one thing before they do anything, and that is, can I believe in the leadership team to help me grow this brand?
Right.
I may love the food. I may think the brand is very cool, but is the team in place to make that happen for me? And so that was something that was so important to me when I ran Mo's, and I still to this day. We came here, we worked on the culinary, we worked on the team, and then we worked on the processes. So how technologically advanced is this brand compared to others? Because when you're evaluating multiple concepts, you tick and tie every aspect of the business. When I got here, there was no online ordering. There was no app. There was no loyalty program. All of that work had to get done. Mm-hmm. There was no technology for the franchisees to access recipes and manuals. So we worked with Fran Connected to build our hub, if you will. So I feel like this brand that has 38 units today is still light years ahead of many of the brands I've run in the past. We've had the time and the patience to set it up properly. So when franchise prospects sit around this table, they're a bit enamored with a brand with 38 restaurants that can perform at this level.
Yeah. Now that you've been through this a couple times, where you've come into a brand and you set it up for scaling it and taking it to new heights, I feel like you have to kind of get the brand down pat before you do that, right? Because at a certain point you get to this place where the brand is too big to change it very much. So is that your challenge? I mean, what is specifically that challenge, that place you want to get the brand to before you can step on the accelerator?
I thought we needed to touch every aspect of the business. So it was the people, it was the culinary. I mean, we had to form here a culture of supporting franchisees. It's a very different culture in an organization to support GMs and district managers in a 100% owned company store culture. It's very different when you bring in lots of strangers that are now going to start to run the brand. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I started to talk about and started to teach the group is the culture of concierge level service for franchisees, which those words usually don't go hand in hand.
Right, yeah.
And since I had the opportunity to develop from the ground up an FDD, an Item 19, an Item 7, a franchise agreement, with all of the best and brightest minds in the franchising industry today, coupled with my experience, I wanted the culture of the team to be built from the ground up as well, mm-hmm. in how we're going to treat franchisees moving forward, and something they may not have seen in their past franchise lives.
Sure. The brand was not franchised before you came in, is that right?
It was not.
Okay. So the process of going from non-franchised to franchised, what is that like? I mean, and obviously you developed the systems, manuals, FDD, and all that stuff, but what about finding your first franchisee? What about like understanding the fit for Naf Naf and what the right franchisee profile you're looking for is?
Yeah, we made a conscious decision that, you know, the brand, because the brand is unknown and the cuisine is unknown, right? It's very different to have an unknown brand, but the cuisine is fast casual Mexican, right?
Sure,
The average consumer knows that.
Oh, yeah.
And marketing can build the brand relevance. It's very different when you go out and try to sell a franchise with an unknown cuisine and an unknown brand. And so we took our time. Our goal was to find the top 2% of prospects. We had, as soon as we opened the gates and said we are going to start franchising, we did that through advertising within the industry on our website. Within the first couple of months, we had 700 inquiries. Of those 700, two were qualified, right?
Wow.
From the financial perspective and the experience perspective. And what we're, the types of franchisees that we are bringing on, they have got to be existing franchisees of other restaurant brands. We are not going to be in the business of teaching people how to live in a franchise.
Right.
We are going to teach you about Naf Naf, and we are going to talk about Naf Naf as an ahead of the trend brand that millennials love because they're adventurous Epicureans that love to try new foods and bold flavors.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a bit. This idea of this new cuisine that you're offering, but you guys are in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. I think we tend to fall for this sort of sex appeal of some of the major markets, you know, like LA, you know, something coming out of LA's got that sex appeal, right? Yep. You guys are going into the suburbs, right? Essentially. So who's your demographic? I mean, who do you feel is the core Naf Naf customer?
I could sit here and give you the standard spiel. We attract 18 to 34-year-olds,
sure, yeah.
50-50 female, male. We tend to, through the research that we did, through the rebranding effort, going back over 2 years now, this adventurous Epicurean became our demographic. It wasn't about an age. It wasn't about a race. It wasn't about your background. It was, there are adventurous eaters out there that love to try new foods, and we've titled that person the adventurous Epicurean. And you know, it's amazing. You've spent time in our restaurants, and when you spend time in the downtown restaurants here in Chicago, there is every age group, there is every demographic on race that you can imagine online. Some are vegetarians, some are not. Some are just adventurous eaters. Some have become fans of the product and the concept. So we are looking for I think the only demographic or psychographic I could give you would be more around white collar workers.
Okay.
Is the target. Educated white collar workers, and then anybody in between.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I really like that idea because I think that people get a little, you know, caught up in this idea of I want to go open in this city or that city and really conquer the young urban millennial or whatever it might be. But there's so much white space in this country. And you talk about the adventurous Epicurean. I mean, so much of America is adventurous Epicurean today, right? I mean, there's so much opportunity out there that brands are not tapping into.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to solve, as you think about franchising, we wanted to solve for where this brand could succeed. And so to date, we've solved in urban and suburban locations. We have locations inside malls, so food court operations work. We're in college towns, we know they work. And so we're in high-rise buildings, we're in freestanding buildings. I think we've solved for lots of the questions that a prospect will ask during their process of evaluating the brand. Why Naf? Why Naf?
You mentioned non-traditional. That was your background. I know Moe's, you tapped into non-traditional really well. What's your plan for non-traditional and the Naf Naf brand?
I've always been a believer that non-traditional is a very effective way to build the brand's name. You get the brand in front of millions of people very, very quickly. So we do have a strategy. We are talking. We're talking to the leaders in higher education for college and university locations. We're working on 3 airport locations right now. those are really the focus.
Okay.
Malls, not so much. But certainly to get the brand in front of millions of people every year, and they may not see a Naf Naf in their home city for years to come, but when it gets there, they'll remember it.
Yeah. You said earlier that process of getting Naf Naf up to the digital age, the app, the loyalty program, all that. I mean, really, when you think about it, even since you've joined this company, the industry at large has evolved so much. The tools available to operators, third-party delivery, all of this stuff. So the off-premises category suddenly becomes sort of that interesting, appealing thing and an opportunity to take a brand into, capture a new consumer base, I guess you could say. How much has that part of things affected the Naf Naf growth model? How much does it inform sort of your ideas of where to expand and how to promote the brand and all that stuff?
It's changing everything we do. It used to be so easy to run a restaurant. Open the doors, serve great food, have a clean restaurant, some good service, and you could be successful. Today, the amount of technology in that box is mind-blowing, and to try to recruit GMs that understand and have that experience is a challenge. But when you start to talk about how delivery and third-party delivery and online ordering and pickup are changing our business, it's causing us, certainly like everybody else, to shrink the size of the box. It's causing us to think about how we satisfy the guest experience in a completely different way. Inside the restaurant, speed of service, good food, good service. Delivery, consumers not caring about the food quality. There's two words that we have always used in the industry more on the supply chain side of the business: order accuracy and on-time delivery. That was how we held the Ciscos of the world to their task.
It's like drive-through in QSR.
That's exactly right. So now you've got those two words that are now the only two words we think about when it comes to how we handle our third-party delivery. Is it on time, and is the order accurate? It's no longer about, is the food hot, is the food good, because the consumer has pushed that attribute to the side. And so order accuracy is something that everybody struggles with. We order food on delivery 6 days a week in this office. 60% of the time it's wrong from anybody we order from, whether it's from Chick-fil-A or Chipotle or anybody. It's something that is a challenging thing inside the restaurant box that we have to get right.
Right.
And everybody, we're suffering with it. We know everybody else is suffering with it because we order from those third-party delivery companies. So it's something that is going to be top of mind right now, and is really, I think, is going to drive market share, because the in-store experience is shrinking. We know that. Our third-party delivery is up 600% over last year.
Wow.
Right? And our catering is up 58%. So the opportunity to consume your product outside the four walls is doing nothing but growing. And so how do you get better at it? And how do you measure against the things that consumer thinks about your food, which is totally different than what it used to be?
Yeah. That's so funny, because it feels like the third-party delivery, this off-premises, is almost reset customer expectations of quality. I mean, like what you're saying, it's like almost like they don't even expect it to be good anymore. But what's funny is that's also kind of at odds with this idea of the visual nature of food, the Instagram, ability of food. How do you bring those two things together? Because you guys do have some attractive food, right? And you will want to encourage that sort of visual sharing from your customers, but then at the same time, you hand it off to this third party who it could completely change en route to the customer.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone's food, after it gets handed to a third-party delivery company, is Instagrammable when it gets to the destination. I don't. And I'm not sure it needs to be, right? You're right. Our food is beautiful, and there are plenty of pictures of our food out there. It's something that we grapple with, right, internally. How do we continue to innovate, to be best in class, that allows us to drive sales in a third-party delivery setting? We're doing the right things inside the store, so we have full second lines in all of our stores to handle online ordering and delivery. So we don't want the in-store guest experience to be bothered with that. So those locations, every one of our locations has a second line. We've put the shelves in the dining room to make it easy for the drivers. We've taught all of the crew and managers that the third-party delivery driver is our friend. It is not our foe. They are people to be coddled. Give them free beverages. Give them free lunches. Make them want to come to Naf Naf and pick up the food because they will care for it better.
Interesting.
We hope.
Yeah, right.
Let's make it easy for them. Let's not have them go get utensils. Let's not have them worry about napkins. Let's do all of that for them so they can come in and grab it and get the food as fast as they can to their destination.
You said your third-party delivery is up 600%. How does that make you feel? I mean, is that incremental? Do you feel like this is good for business?
You know, we're still looking at things like profitability of a delivery order. You know, the rates that the third party delivery companies are charging. The industry is upset about.
Right.
It's almost like you have to be in that business. I think over time, things will become more economically favorable to the restaurant operator. It's okay now because it's still, while it's growing in leaps and bounds, it's still a smaller percentage of our business. But when that third party delivery truly gets to the 20, 30, 40%, now what's happening in that box called the restaurant is changing. Right now, the in-store and guest may not be as important, and now you've really got to focus on it, which is why we opened up our first ghost kitchen with Kitchen United.
Oh yeah,
right. So right around the corner from our office here in Chicago, we're in there, and we're in there to learn how that business model works. Because I'm going to have franchisees that ask that question in the near future. What about ghost kitchens? And that will be a completely different franchise agreement. So we've got to get smart on it. We've been in it for 3 months. We're learning a ton, and it's something that I feel like we have stayed ahead of the curve on something new, because I felt like the company, and I felt like many companies, played catch up with delivery. Like it entered the community. No one knew what it was. No one knew how to get a deal done. What was the menu? What was the packaging? And so I think the industry played catch up.
It was a novelty for a while,
it was a
right?
novelty.
Yeah.
Now everybody's got exclusive agreements. They've got massive investments in these third party companies. I wanted to be on the front end of this ghost kitchen phenomenon. I'm not sure it's a phenomenon yet, but it could be. And I wanted to be on the front end of that, not playing catch up. So we've opened up our first ghost kitchen.
Well, it seems that, you know, the restaurant experience is, I mean, it's increasingly a digital marketplace, and that's not going to change. So whether or not they're interacting directly with your brand on your app, or if they're interacting with a third party via, you know, a ghost kitchen, you know, third party delivery, whatever, the digitization part of that is not going to change. And so whether or not ghost kitchens make it, or third party delivery as we know it makes it, there's still going to be that sort of digital marketplace that you have to be a part of, right? I mean, is there any environment in which that's not true, where the food speaks for itself and you're around the corner from this huge chunk of people who just love your brand and come and check it out?
I think there might be some mom and pops that have been in business for 40 years. I think about brands in Chicago like Gene and Giorgetti's. I don't know that they have an app. They've been on our block here since 1940. I don't know that they care about delivery, right? They're just, when you're an institution and you have one store, maybe you don't need that.
There's no expectation.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
So where does this go from here then? I mean, you know, when you think about the third-party delivery services, rather high profile right now, they're struggling. I mean, you know, there is some question as to whether they can make it. I mean, they're not making money. It feels like the restaurant's not making money. So ultimately, this is meeting a consumer need that is very popular, but nobody's really happy about it or making money on it. Where can it possibly go from here?
I'm not a futurist. I'm a realist. But you're right. It's going to evolve, and since its inception, it has evolved massively every quarter. It seems. I think there are going to be some players that get swallowed up. I think there's definitely going to be some acquisition. We haven't seen private equity jump into the third-party delivery yet. It's been more like restaurant brands and Google investing.
Right.
So it's technology companies investing in technology companies. I think what I would be more worried about if I was a third-party delivery provider is regulation around what's happening with with that food. Right. We have such strict guidelines of how we handle our food inside that box, right? Temperature checks regularly, sanitation, clean hands, right? Hair nets. And then you hand it off to another third party, and then everything falls off. So you hear things like New York saying that the third party drivers are going to have food handlers licenses so that they understand.
Wow.
Don't know where all this goes,
Right.
but I think that will be the next evolution of what happens to third party. Because if costs start to be layered on to the third party delivery drivers because of regulation, who wants to be a third party delivery driver?
Right. Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So it's going to be interesting to watch from the outside.
Yeah. What else is keeping you up at night these days? I imagine labor's not a very fun thing to deal
Labor's
with.
not fun. Turnover continues to be high. The labor pool is so small. It's amazing. It's amazing how much time we continue to train. We'll train an employee for 3 weeks. We'll have them for another 2 weeks, and sometimes they're gone. And that's just a fascinating aspect of running a restaurant today.
Yeah.
I feel like our turnover is getting better in the fourth quarter versus 3, 2, and 1, and I feel good about first quarter. And I feel good about that because I think a lot of the turnover that we and many have is really tied to whether or not your GM's the right person. We've spent the last 18 months with a concerted effort to change out our general managers and bring in more quality, greater experience, higher paid GMs. Mm-hmm. And I think that will lend itself to people being happier in the workplace and maybe staying a little longer.
And then it comes back to culture. You were talking about earlier. You have to invest in
how
that.
we push our culture down. I mean, we're talking about our mission, vision, and values at the store level now, mm-hmm. and what that means to the employee, and what are the on the moment incentives that we have. So thanks for doing a good job. Go pick something out of the catalog. It's a NAF shirt, a NAF hat, or something like that. Those seem to work a little bit. We're mm-hmm. looking at things where we can get employees paid at the end of their shift, mm-hmm. right? So instant cash, instant gratification, and there will be more and more opportunities for things like that to help drive the culture at the store level.
Sure. So Moe's, going back to your Moe's days, taking this to 700 locations, that was Mexican food. Mexican food is very established in the U.S., had an identity prior to Moe's. Middle Eastern food's a little different. Do you think the same scale potential is there, what you accomplished at Moe's? Can you accomplish that same kind of scaling with Naf Naf?
I think the franchisees that we are talking to, the prospects and the deals that we've sold, are interested in Naf because it's different. Mm-hmm. They have current franchise restaurant brands in their portfolio, or they have had and sold them and are looking to do something new. When you think about what is in that fast casual space, because franchise prospects are still excited about the fast casual space. Mm-hmm. The better burger, the better pizza, the better chicken, the better salad. There's just so many players in that role. And then you get to ethnic foods, and we have now emerged as a franchise opportunity. If you think about the competitive set that we sit in, or the competitive set that the consumer puts us in, with our kava and roti, they're not franchising right now. I have always thought that first to market is so important. Mm-hmm. Even when I was at Moe's, I mean, we owned the Florida market, and Chipotle came in, but we crushed it in that market. So I think we're ahead of the curve there. I do think that, based on the excitement level that we have had. So we launched our franchising program. It took us 18 months to put it together. We launched in February, March of this year. And we've sold 50 deals so far. Of those 50 deals, we have 5 leases already signed. Those franchisees have signed leases in their markets. So we've sold out Indiana, we've sold out Iowa, we've sold out Tennessee, we've sold out the rest of the western suburbs. We've done a 10-store deal with Love's Travel Stops, again, non-traditional, to bring the brand to the masses. And we're actively working on 6 other cities right now with a pipeline of about 120 deals. So having been in it for 6 to 8 months has been, I think, pretty exciting for a brand with an unknown cuisine and an unknown brand.
Sure, yeah.
So I think we're off to a good start. There's energy around it. There are people that have had this food years ago here in Chicago and have been waiting for that day to come on the announcement of franchising.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited, and I'm pretty optimistic about it.
Do you think the marketplace has changed, though, too, since Moe's came into the field? I mean, when you think about the fact that when Moe's really started, getting going, I mean, it was it and Chipotle, and then later, Qdoba, and that was kind of it in some ways. Of course, the Middle Eastern food, you really Mediterranean too. It's just a much smaller field, but at the same time, just restaurants in general, fast casuals in general, there's so many options out there. Does that change the field and what you are capable of accomplishing with growth?
I think the amount of new restaurant, whether it's fast casual or other entrants into the industry, is fascinating. Tens of thousands of new locations every year. So I think there's going to be some fall off in 20. There's lots of real estate still out there that's available. Our franchisees are finding it. Rents are not our friend right now. That changes with the economy. But it is fascinating how many new restaurants open every year and how many of them are new concepts.
Yeah. Well, and that's, people get attracted to this space. There's the romanticism of, opening your own restaurant, and then the failure rate is just as high as it's ever been, if not higher now, right? I mean, and so the cream, rises to the top, I think. And so to some degree, your goal is to maintain being that cream, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's keeping ahead of things. But you've also seen, you've seen fast casual in general really evolve. I mean, you were with the industry from an early stage before it hit that, call it 2011, 2012, I think, where it really took off. And it's interesting to watch now because you see Chipotle has drive-thrus now, which I find very interesting because I remember when they said,
we'll never have a drive-thru.
That's fast food. We don't do drive-thru.
Same for Panera, right?
Right, yeah.
Drive-thrus.
Yeah, and Cava's doing drive-thrus now too. Not to make this all about drive-thru, but it's interesting to see how fast casual, I think for a while QSR was trying to be fast casual with food quality, and now I see fast casual trying to be QSR with convenience and accessibility. So where do you see the industry in general today and how it's changing and how maybe that's, a good thing for what you're capable of doing?
I think every brand out there is trying to figure out a way to get their loyal guests, their fans, their customers to use them more frequently. And whether that's engaging in third-party delivery or doing drive-thrus, those are the things that brands are doing to evolve to capture more sales and get their customers to come to them more often. That used to happen once every 5 or 6 years in the industry. Oh, we've got to do some innovation. Let's work on that. I feel like we're doing it every quarter now. What are we doing to keep our fans coming to our restaurants? Today, I can have lunch from literally 100 restaurants and have it at my desk inside of 40 minutes.
Right.
5 years ago, I couldn't do that. I had to go to the 5 places within walking distance around my office. I hear of people in a price point of $11 or $12, which is what our price point is, ordering grilled chicken Caesar salad from Capital Grill for lunch and having it delivered. That wasn't in the realm of the industry 10 years ago. So people are starting to wonder why traffic is down in every single aspect of our business. It's down because people have so many more options to eat lunch. Nobody stopped eating lunch.
Yeah, right.
Nobody's bringing their lunch to work. They just have so many options.
Spreading it around.
To have it come from a much bigger radius.
Right.
We're ordering food now from 3 miles away and having it brought to the office. Who did that 10 years ago?
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
So there are restaurants their delivery and then their online sales continue to climb at a great rate. Their in-store traffic continues to be down. And at some point, you'll find restaurants, I think, factoring in the third-party delivery into their traffic number.
Yeah,
not just the in-store traffic.
Right.
Because the sales are going to continue to climb. We've got to look at it differently.
Sure.
Because the industry's changing.
Yeah. Last question for you, Paul. You have had this really illustrious career. You've experienced a lot of different angles of the restaurant industry, learned a lot, met a lot of people along the way. If you're talking to people who are just getting into this space, into the restaurant industry, opening their own restaurant or franchising even, what is your advice to them as an entrepreneur? What would you suggest to them as they get going in their business? Yeah,
I try to get to those people while they're still students, right? Because sometimes my advice might be too late, right? So I go back to my alma mater regularly and talk to the classes, and there are a couple of things I tell them. One is find a mentor early in your career. While you're a student, find somebody that you trust, that you could share your successes and failures with, to help guide some of your decision making. of whether or not you should become an entrepreneur after graduation, or should you go get experience in a large organization, or should you start up your own company. You can't do that with your own brain. You should bounce those ideas off of someone that you trust, that is either in the business or outside the business. I also tell people, I feel like I've had a successful career, and I've said to people, this is not a sprint. Stop trying to become the president in your second year of whatever you're doing.
Right.
It's a marathon, and it's a 30-year marathon. And so I can say that because I've lived it, right? But the most important thing I think that the young generation should think about is as you're working to climb whatever that corporate ladder is in your mind, whether you're an entrepreneur or you've decided to go work for an organization, climb the ladder with your peers. Don't try to climb over them. Don't try to push them down. That's not going to get you to where you ultimately want to be in your career.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me. I love being here.
There you have it. That's my conversation with Naf Naf Grill's CEO, Paul Damico. As always, go to QSRmagazine.com for all the news and insights you need on the QSR and fast casual restaurant industries. Go to QSRmagazine.com/podcast for the entire Fast Forward archive. Or, of course, subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. Rate the podcast. Send us feedback. We would love to hear your thoughts or hear any suggestions you might have for guests on this podcast. Just send them to sam@QSRmagazine.com. Would love to hear your thoughts. That's all for today. We'll talk to you again next time.